The Dark Druid, Ireland's greatest hero, legendary warrior, and lover, heir to a world of strife and sorcery. This is Finn McCoomhall. With skill and courage, he sets off on a perilous quest to save a desperate land and to free his beloved from the shadowy magic and thunderous evil of the one known as the Dark Druid. He said, you know that. What about when they come? Call your card. Call your card. What you got now? Say, easy on the breeze. He said, slow down. All right. Retune the Patrie. You easy on our way. Fire burn round the fire. Fire burn round the fire. Got us on the way. That's for sure. Right? Quick. I felt you on the wind, where the wind with the shadow and the light of the hero. Got it shining on, say, circle around. Ready? Now we begin. The Dark Druid by Kenneth C. Flint. Okay, ready? At the ready. Come on, baby. Come on. Right. A roaring sound rose outside the hall. It appeared like a whirlwind of black clouds dropping in, a corkscrewing pillar toward the floor. The pillar's base landed nearby the fire. Just before Finn's platform, As it did, the upper portion of it sank instantly down. The wind's dying, the darkness fading away, disclosing an ominous form. It was cloaked from head to foot in a black robe, and seemed at first a slender column of dark stone. But then, arms slowly lifted, raising out wide sleeves, like raven's wings. The head came up. Shaking back a hood to reveal the lean and lined face of the dark druid. So these are the mortals who dare to oppose my will, he sneered. A sorry lot, like all their kind. The dark druid saw, or it says sob or sad, I don't know, sod, S-A-B-D. Okay, whatever. We'll just say sobbed, I don't know. Cried in a despairing voice. Ah, there you are, my little fawn. He crowed triumphantly. You didn't really believe you could escape from me, did you? He stepped toward her, and she cowered back, but Finn moved to draw her behind him. Facing the druid with a look of defiance. Get back from her, he warned. She has been given sanctuary here. The druid stopped. His gaze flickered over the fair young man. You would be well advised not to trouble me, boy, he said in a commanding tone. His right arm lifted higher, bringing into view from the robe's folds the long staff he gripped. Stand away now, and I'll not harm you. The druid stepped forward, swinging up his staff to point its silver tip at Finn. Next page. It was just the intro already. So, to my colleagues in the faculty of Plattsmouth High School, okay, who through my years of writing these books have put up with me, humored me, helped me, and become my friends. That's cool. All right. Here we go. Book 1, The Enchanted Fawn. Chapter 1, The Fawn. The forest clearing slumbered peacefully in the quiet of a warm, bright afternoon. Shafts of the purest sunlight from a cloudless sky slanted down through the high branches of the surrounding oaks and cast brilliant spots like glowing emeralds upon the open ground. Fine motes of dust, not rushed by any breeze, drifted lazily in the shining columns. There was little other movement in the clearing. A gray squirrel boldly browsed far from the safety of his trees. A few birds flitted in the treetops, their occasional calls sounding hushed beneath the vast cloak of silence that enwrapped the wood. A magnificent stag pushed out from the underbrush into the clearing. It stood for a moment, head proudly erect. Great spread of antlers lifted high in a display of exalted rank. Then it strode slowly, grandly, fearlessly across the empty ground to the center of the open space. Here it stopped, looked austerely around, and finally designed to lower its head and nibble on the lush grass that could not grow within the shadows of the wood. Then came the sound of the horn. It was a low, sustained note, carrying clearly through the quiet forest. The stag's head jerked up, turning toward the sound. The squirrel froze, listening, bushy tail jerking nervously. The birds in the treetops about the clearing fell abruptly, silent. The sound came again, from much closer this time. And with it came new sounds, continuous sounds that grew louder rapidly. The baying of many hounds and the shrill, wailing cries of men. The stag bolted away, vanishing into the trees. The squirrels scuttled for the safety of the nearest trunk. The birds, as if a single being, flashed upward just as a heavy body crashed through the last screen of the underbrush into the open. It was an enormous boar that had now charged into the clearing. Its size was closer to that of a small bull than of a pig. The massive muscled shoulders reached as high as the man's chest. The body was sinewy and hard, moving lithely, and with tremendous power. The head was immense, its bristled snout sporting long, curved tusks. Above the snout, tiny eyes glowed redly, like hot coals. It didn't pause as it burst into the open area. The sounds of dogs and men gave evidence that they were close behind it. They were close. Started across the clearing at a run. It was less than halfway across when a pack of hounds began to pour from the woods in close pursuit. At least 50 animals formed the energetic group, all in full cry. Most of them were sleek, slender, long-limbed animals with small heads and pointed muzzles. But leading them were two wolfhounds, great, shaggy-coated beasts, nearly as large as ponies. Close on the flying heels of the pack, a band of men leaped into the open. There were some 200 of them, their tall, lean, wiry bodies clad in short tunics. There, bared, fair-skinned arms and legs flashing as they ran. Their hair was long and mostly of light hues, either clasped at the nape of the neck or loosely plaited to keep it out of the way. They wore no adornment and carried no weapons, save for short thrusting spears with broad points of gleaming black iron. At their head ran a young man of striking looks, clean and boldly featured, with a thick plait of hair, so blonde as to shine nearly silver in the sun. His smoothly muscled body moved effortlessly, tirelessly, as he flew across the ground. Close behind him ran another man of a like age, quite handsome too, but swarthier of complexion and dark of hair. By the time these men were all into the clearing, the boar was nearing its far side. Before the beast could reach the cover of the trees again, however, the two wolfhounds were upon it. One nipped at a heel, the other made a tremendous leap, fastening its jaws upon a bristled ear. The boar squealed with pain and swung with amazing agility. Its ear ripped, and the hound was thrown aside, rolling to the ground. Further enraged by this wounding, the boar wheeled, brought to bay by the full pack, who now encircled it, barking and snarling, but keeping a wary distance as they awaited the approaching men. But the boar did not wait, as if knowing itself to be caught in a fatal trap. Its desperate gaze fell upon the men, focusing upon them as the source of its torments. It gave out a frenzied screech and charged, clearly bent upon revenge. It clove through the pack of dogs like a scythe through a ripe wheat, sweeping them aside. Head down, deadly tusks thrust forward. It was like a blasting gale, raging torrent, and now descended upon the hunters. Most of them were nimble enough to leap from the path of its first rush. Only one hapless fellow, seeing the move just too late, was unable to get himself clear. A tusk point caught him at the back of one of his thighs as he turned away, tearing a ragged line deep into the flesh. He jerked and staggered, toppling to the earth, bright blood gushing from the wound. The boar carried past him. By its momentum, pivoted with a speed equal to that of a long-limbed hound's and started back toward him, bent on finishing its work. But as it did so, the dark-haired man bounded in. He came up close beside the charging animal, thrusting out with his spear, striking for the heart. The point struck home, but just too high, penetrating the thick hide, only to embed itself in the knotted muscles of the shoulder. The boar gave a loud grunt, but more of an anger than of a pain, pivoting again to face him. He had saved the downed man only to find himself looking into the flaring eyes of the maddened beast. Less than a spear's length away, and without a weapon in his hands, he ducked to one side. The boar moved as swiftly, swinging its head up to catch him with those rending tusks. Tusks, however, never reached their mark. For the fair-haired young hunter, using the other's diversion, A chance to move up behind the animal now leaped boldly onto it. He mounted it as easily as if he were vaulting onto a tame pony's back. The boar squealed in both astonishment and rage, twisted its head, about to get at him. Quickly realizing the futility of this, it began to buck and writhe with the most incredible vigor. As if seized by some fit, the convulsions of its powerful body seemed to take it in all directions at once. The man upon it stayed firmly seated there. His muscled legs were locked against its sides, strained taut with the pressure. This left both his hands free to raise short thrusting spear high above the boar's head and take careful aim. Then in a blow, backed by all the weight and strength of his arms, he drove the weapon down. The spear head slammed into the corded neck at the base of the massive skull. The sharp point went deep, its keen edge severing the spine. The boar died instantly. Its frenzied movements ceased, and its heavy body crashed to the earth. Rolling sideways, the fair-haired man, in a simple, almost casual move, hopped clear. The boar rolled down, its legs kicking up, splayed and jerking in the last death spasm. Then it settled limply and was still. The other hunters moved in to stand around the beast, examining it with looks, keen interest, mixed with awe. The pack joined them as well, the two great hounds venturing forward to sniff at the carcass. By the dog-da, Finn, that was a near thing, the dark-haired man remarked to the fair one, who was more savage than any boar we've ever hunted. He was that, agreed the one called Finn. Turned from the beast and strode to where the wounded man lay. Two of his fellows were already attending him, binding the gash with strips torn from their own tunic hems. The man looked a bit pale from his shock and loss of blood, but seemed in good spirits. "How is it with you, Lugade?" Finn asked. Well enough. I thank you for the saving of me. That animal would have made tatters of me, surely. It's cowlight you should be thanking, Finn said modestly. It was his risk that turned the boar from you. Think no more of it. The dark-haired man told the wounded one, it was no more risk than you would have taken for me. None of you took as much risk as my brave hounds, complained a broadly built, ruddy-faced man with flame-red hair. That beast might have done them some real damage, tearing through them that way. Pardon me. Ah, you think more of the hounds than you do of us? Ha, comrade, a lanky young man reproved. Good. Naturally, that boar gave them good sport, the same as it did us. Bran, Skurlan, come here, Finn called out. The two wolfhounds left the carcass at once and came to him. He squatted between them, examining each of them carefully. "You seem all right," said at last, giving each broad head a loving pat. "Brave work, lads," stood, turning his gaze about him at the company. "Well, the inns are hunting for this day. That inns are hunting for this day," he announced. "Still, we've a fine prize to take back. Let's make ready to start toward Omhween. Preparations were swiftly carried out. The boar was gutted and fastened to a stout pole to be carried by several of the men. Crude but efficient litter was constructed of saplings laced with pliant twigs to carry the wounded man. Soon the hunting party was starting on again. Slow down and breathe. Taking a new direction, moving at a slower but still rapid pace instead of racing ahead. The pack of small-headed dogs now followed, close on the heels of the ruddy man called Comrade. The two great wolfhounds flanked the one named Finn, who strode the head of the group with his dark-haired comrade. As they made their way through the sun-streaked wood, Finn noted that his friend was eyeing him in a way that could only be called quizzical. "And what is it that's troubling you, Cowlight?" finally inquired. "Since you're asking," Cowlight responded frankly. "That was a large risk you were taking back there, don't you think?" Finn shrugged. "I had to stop the boar," he said in an offhand manner. "Otherwise, it would have, you as well, you would have been gone." Maybe the other replied, sounding unconvinced. "Still, you might have distracted it. Instead of flinging yourself upon it like some madman." BobCat, just kidding. Okay. Finn laughed at that. Okay, sorry. Compose. Ha 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 ha. Finn laughed. "And what would be the sport in hunting a beast like that if there weren't a bit of danger in it?" "Bit of danger is one thing," Cowlight said tersely. "Being reckless is something else." His voice had the tone of a scolding parent in it. And Finn looked at him with some astonishment. "Reckless was I? Can this be Cowlight McRonan speaking? The very same warrior who came never have enough of fighting or adventuring. I'll not deny I like a hard fight or a good hunt as much as any man in Ireland," he admitted, "and even more than most. But I've been watching you lately, my good lad, and it's not the same. Finn McCoomhell, I've been seeing the Finn I used to know loved the peace of a summer's morning as much as the thrill of a hunt. And he loved the feel of a fine harp's strings as much as the weight of a good spear. I was a boy then," Finn countered, lightly putting aside his friend's concern. "I've grown older. I've learned that it's the fighting and the hunt that truly make a Fionn warrior feel alive. And that's the truth, is it? Carlite said, still sounding dubious. Finn gave him an even more searching, puzzled look. And why are you so gloomy at that? I'd like to know, he demanded. I'd expect you to be happy to finally have me thinking as yourself. Well, and I suppose I am, Carlite agreed. Still, he added in a musing way, I'm growing older myself, and maybe a bit more cautious with my age. You are the leader of all the Fianna now, and you've become the most important man to Ireland. You can't be taking such needless risks always. Even you with the blood of others in you aren't invulnerable. You know, don't think of that. Finn told him heartily, grinning, clapping him on the shoulder with a gesture of cheerful camaraderie. I've a feeling we're meant to live forever, my old friend. We'll be fighting back to back, hunting these golden woods until the last sun sets behind the ridge of the world. His carefree manners seemed to sweep away the foreboding mood of his comrade. Like a warm spring breeze, banishing a last winter's chill. Carlite laughed too, returning Finn's gesture with a like one. That's the very wish I'd ask of Danu myself, he said earnestly. I. But he broke off abruptly, as with no warning at all. Something shot from the trees close behind them. All the hunting party pulled up short in surprise as it streaked by them and then paused close ahead of them. Turning his head to look back at the group, they could see then that it was a fawn of soft golden hue, a beautiful and willowy creature that stood poised there for a long moment on its slender, frail seeming legs, regarding them with the large, lustrous brown eyes. Then with the flick of the tail, it was off again, bounding away ahead of them with an astonishing speed. All the hounds went uncontrollably wild. Bran and Sciolon were off like arrows, fired after it. The pack was quick to follow in a full cry, looking like a single gray blur with scores of flickering legs. Look at it run, Finn said in awe. Let's be after it. Call back the hounds, Carlite urged. It's only a fawn, not worth hunting. But well worth the chase, Finn countered eagerly. I've seen no deer, not even a great stag with such a speed. Come on! He started ahead, but Carlite grabbed his arm, restraining him. Finn looked to him in perplexity. Don't do this, Finn, the dark-haired one said, his face drawn by a frown of worry. Carlite, what's become of your sporting blood? Finn asked with disbelief. Come on, lads! shouted to the whole party, "A new spear for the one who catches it." And with that, he was off after the pack. The others, including a still frowning cowlight, joined him with the elated hunting cries. Only those burdened with the boar and the wounded man kept on a course for home, muttering dark oaths at their ill luck in being thus left out. Through the sun-streaked woods, the hunters chased the fawn, splashing across brooks, scrambling up the hills, forcing their way through the brush, pressing on with all of their speed and strength in the effort to close in. Despite their best efforts, however, the fawn stayed easily ahead, slipping through the trees like the shadow of a soaring hawk, moving effortlessly, tirelessly, until even the tremendous stamina of the Fionn men and their fine hounds began to ebb. Still, the hunters persisted, even when the animals and the men began to drop out from overwhelming exhaustion. Little by little, their numbers thinned, the strongest stubbornly pushing ahead, fired now by a groaning frustration at the frail animal who taunted them with the white flash of its flicking tail. At last, it was only the two great wolfhounds and the one pair of young hunters, dark and fair, who still kept up pursuit. And Cowlight, realizing this, appealed once more to his companion. "Let's leave it," Finn gasped out. "It's no use." There was no response from Finn. "Well, I'm not quitting," Cowlight announced in an annoyed tone, pulling to a halt. This too had no effect. Finn went on, not slackening his pace or even looking around. "Finn," Cowlight called after his swiftly dwindling form. "Finn, please give it up." His voice echoed after the speeding man, but Finn would not relent. He was too totally caught up in the challenge now. His face aglow, intense with concentration. His muscles pumping rhythmically. Hold on. His muscles pumping rhythmically, steadily to carry him on. His eyes riveted on the way before him. Bron and Skjolen could be seen some distance ahead, pounding on as strongly, as stubbornly as himself. They were keeping within sight of the racing fawn, but barely. They ran on through the silent, glowing forest, leaving the others farther and farther behind. Time seemed suspended. It was as if they were alone now in a mystical, wild wood that went on forever, where pursuer and pursued were intent only on this contest, and there was nothing else in the world for them. Then abruptly, the fawn stopped, pulled up, and turned, faced the enormous wolfhounds who still charged upon it. At a full run, Finn, seeing this, tried to put on yet more speed, crying out, "Bron, Skjolen, don't harm the fawn!" But there was no need at all for this warning. As he came closer to them, a look of astonishment overspread his face. For the two wolfhounds had made no move that might harm or even frighten the slender fawn. They had stopped some way from it and were now approaching it with great care. The fawn watched them with some signs of timidity, its liquid eyes apprehensive, its frail body trembling slightly. But the hounds only thrust forward their broad muzzles cautiously to have a snip at it. They then exchanged a look that bespoke a most human puzzlement. Their heads cocked to one side, thick brows lifted. Bran, Skulon, what's wrong? Finn asked, striding toward them. Instantly, the hounds whirled toward him, taking up flanking positions by the fawn. Could only be called defensive. Finn stopped, staring at them in surprise. Well, by the gods, he said, what are you two about? He took another step closer, but Braun lifted his head and bared his teeth, growling in a deep, warning tone. Be easy, Bran. Finn told him soothingly, I don't know what's happened to you, but I promise you that I'll not harm the fawn. This seemed to reassure both the hounds. They nodded and stepped slightly aside, allowing him to move between them. The deer, still trembling, still with fear glistening in its dark eyes, nevertheless kept its place, letting him approach. Very slowly, he lifted a hand. Even more slowly, he put it out. Finally, most gently, he caressed the smooth, soft head. At his touch, the fawn voiced a small sound like a sigh and lifted its head to rub against his hand. It was a clear gesture of returned friendship, of acceptance, as might be given by a cat. Finn's look of amazement grew. Well, you're a friendly enough creature, he said. Well, why did you stop? As if in an attempt to answer, the fawn stepped forward, resting his head against his side, stared up at him with an expression in its eyes that seemed to implore. From its throat, there came a low whimpering. Finn shook his head. I don't know. What is your wanting, fawn? But our own game is ended. Will not harm you. It will not pursue you any longer. You're free to go. He looked to the hounds. Come on, lads. It's time to be starting back to find the others. Stepped away from the fawn, turned, started off, heading back the way they had come. But after a few strides, he glanced around, only to stop and stare again. In uncomprehending way, the two dogs were following. The fawn was prancing right along between them. Fawn? I told you, be off, Finn said more forcefully. You can't be following us. This made no impression on the creature. Remained between the hounds. I said, be off. Finn said sharply, stepping towards it, as if to shoo it away. The hounds crouched, snarling. Finn backed away, lifting his hands in capitulation. All right, told them in a humoring way. I understand you, lads. If your new friend wishes to come with us, I'll make no objection. Once again, he turned and started off. But as he led the way back along the faint passage their chase had created, glanced behind him often. Always the fawn was with them. Shepherded closely by the pair of hounds, they traveled back for only a short way before they came upon the rest of the company. Now recovered, rejoined, and following Finn's trail with Cowlight at their head. Upon seeing the fawn, the pack of small-headed dogs went wild once more, swarming forward, barking excitedly. Bran and Skilon dealt swiftly and quite sharply with them. They both leaped before the fawn, hair bristling, ears laid back, great jaws snapping out with yelps of terror. The leaders of the pack quickly retreated into their fellows, throwing the pack into confusion. Then they were all withdrawing before the savage threat of the wolfhounds, falling into a cowering, chastened mass far from the fawn. What in all the great world, Cowlight exclaimed, moving forward. Easy, Cowlight, Finn warned, stepped toward him and away from the fawn with its two guardians. Not too close just yet. The lads are being very protective. So I can see you'd think the thing was their own pup. They have struck up quite a friendship. Finn agreed. But why? Cowlight said in a perplexed way, looking from the dogs to the frail, innocent-seeming creature. Why would they act that way? And why would this creature be wanting to join us? Perhaps it was raised by men, Finn suggested. Then he shrugged. I don't know. It was a strange thing. It's more than strange, Cowlight said darkly. I don't like the feeling of this, Finn. I don't like it at all. Finn laughed. Maybe you're getting too cautious, my old friend, he said in a cheerfully scoffing tone. Leave off your worrying. It's just fun. It's madness, Cowlight retorted in exasperation. That fawn can't stay with us. Would you like to explain that to the lads? Finn asked him quizzically. Cowlight looked at the two huge animals who were watching him closely, warily, challengingly, as if they were well understood. What he was saying? He sighed and shook his head. No, he admitted that I would not. The mouths of both wolfhounds stretched widely in what could only be called triumphant grins. Okay. Ooh. So, the next chapter is called The Druid's Lair. We'll decide if I'm going to read that. Yeah. Alrighty. That was cool. It was very cool. Enjoyed that. Sometimes fantasy novels come across as, very childish. But that writer went to the hardcore. And that's what I like. And this cheesy bullshit, A little bit of dressing is okay on your salad, but drowning it doesn't work. Oh! in the woodland. You don't know what that fawn is when you chase it into the woodland. Maybe that's a goddess or a druidess in disguise. Said, burning flame. He said on the way, froggy in the throat. One day, one night, I just decided, put everything to the side. It doesn't matter anymore. I think it was when I found your body in the back room. Father, I remember folk all the way. He told me, hold on, watch it down, say. 'Cause my father was a folk man, was a folkish man, long, long, long. Like to thank him for what he gave to me. He told me, folk culture all the way, hey son. Remember where you came from? Jay, remember long ago, Father, you were shining on. Jay, you weren't like them anyway. Well, the soul, my people are in those hills in the woodland be. Who's driving snakes out? Who's driving them out? Who's driving them out? Who's driving? Be a liar in the wind, you know. Spirit of the land, oh, see. Spirit of the land, oh, goddess of sovereignty. Keep your fake names. You don't even speak the language they speak anyway. So where you going? It's in the circle round said. Folks, so memory. Get way to the other world. All they know is how to shatter. Fractal in, fractal out. Shatter your illusion. going to the source. Grandmother, grandfather, and the flame tree and world, flame tree and world, flame tree and world, flame tree and world. They're coming. Better save your culture to WoodStone, pop music and politics. When they come to erase it all, you won't even be there. I'm scratching your ass in the corner, you don't even know. Serious as I am, you know. We're going. Better get down, deep down, deep down. Root down, say, root down, say, root down. What's the point of anything else anyway? You know, rich people control from the top. What you gonna say? Woodland beat. Restoration on the way. Full soul, shine on, say, free, free, free. Folk soul, easy on the way, is coming down to say, they're gonna be when they erase it all. You stand at ready, shaking like a leaf, shaking like a leaf, don't you know? Can you take me on a hero's journey to help him? Hey. Do you feel or just read words? Yeah. Grandmother, grandfather on the trail, which way go? 'Cause you know it's without fail. Say, hey. Oh. Say, did I matter anyway, or you just give me lip service? Hey, but you love me as trial and family. What am I to you? What are you to me? But if you bring love, if you bring love to the tribe and family, said grandmother, grandfather on the way. Easy on the way. All right. The Druid's Lair. The fangs of the two bears showed in threatening snarls as they forced the man out of the woods into the open. He was lanky of build, very youthful of look, but with rather wolfish features, long nose, pointed chin, and with a crafty slant to his small eyes. Pardon me. And with a crafty slant to his small eyes. He looked to be much the worse for some long wear, his tunic ragged, his face and body bruised, his knobby elbows and knees scraped to bleeding. Just now he was looking behind him, the two pursuing the beasts. With an expression of great apprehension, there was obvious good reason for this. The bears were of enormous size, more than waist high to him, and well over twice his bulk, broad of shoulder, thick of body, and short of limb. Gotta make sure, change position. Thick of body, short of limb. Okay, starting. There was an obvious good reason for this. The bears were of enormous size, more than waist high to him, and well over twice his bulk, broad of shoulder, thick of body, and short of limb. They were lumbered forward and driving the man ahead. With his attention directed upon them, as he moved the rocky ground, the raw flesh was badly scraped again. He groaned and lay still, as if too weary to rise, but the bears would allow him to no respite. They crowded up close on either side, growling menacingly. With agonized movements, the man levered himself up on his arms, drew in his long legs, and finally clambered upright once more. As he did, his eyes lifted to fix on the now lay before him. A round-crested, craggy-sided mount of blue-gray stone rose abruptly, starkly, to loom ominously like a thunderstorm rising on the curved rim of a calm sea. A look of abject terror filled the young man's face at the sight of it. He stood frozen, staring. One of these bears moved in, nudging him in the back with its broad nose. He wrenched his gaze from the mount and looked to it, his expression pleading. "You can't really mean to take me there," he said in a whimpering voice. "You've got to believe me, I didn't do anything. Please let me go." The bear's response was to take another step forward, roughly shouldering him ahead. He stumbled, nearly fell again, but caught himself, drawing up his body tense, with eyes searching around him desperately. The bears appeared to anticipate his move with a swiftness extraordinary for the seemingly hulking beasts. They bounded up on either side of him, trapping him close between them. He looked from one to another, and his body sagged in defeat. "All right," told them, nearly in tears. "I'll not try to escape again." They went on. The young man moved slowly, limping now, but the beasts had no mercy. They kept very close, one or another constantly shouldering him in the side to urge him along. Soon they reached the base of the rocky mount and turned to follow along its base. When they reached a cliff face of gray, smooth, slate-like stone, they stopped. Here, one of the bears reared upward on its hind legs. It towered nearly a head above the man as it walked forward to plant a massive paw against a faint circle inscribed in the wall of stone. Then the beast dropped again to all fours and shuffled back several steps. The cliff face began to vibrate. From within came a low, rumbling sound. Growing swiftly louder, a crack appeared at the foot of the wall, running upward as if an earthquake were fissuring the cliff. It widened rapidly, the halves of the smooth stone pulling apart like great portals, opening, revealing a broad, high tunnel. As the hapless young man stared along this shadowed passageway, his strength seemed to abandon him, looked incapable of movement. Rooted to the spot, white face and trembling. But his guardians quickly took care of this. They pressed in close on either side again, and one started him on with a hard swat to his behind. Wow. The corridor ran straight into the mount's depths, angling slightly downward. As soon as they had entered, the opening in the cliff face rumbled and closed, shutting off the view of the world outside, sealing itself up as if it had never been. The young man looked back and watched as this happened, his face a mask of despair as he saw this only avenue to escape disappear. With the sunlight shut off, it was now apparent that the other light was flittering up from the tunnel's farther end. It was faint first, reflecting softly from the smooth stone of the corridor walls, but it grew steadily as the trio moved along. And accompanying it came the growing sound of music, a lively air being played on pipes, tiompan, and harp. Then the corridor widened, abruptly opened into a chamber which contained the source of both music and light. Symbology? It was a single space of enormous size, not a room so much as what appeared to be the interior of the entire mountain hollowed out. Its walls were formed of the rough living stone. They slanted slightly inward as they rose, forming a cone enclosing an area in which an eagle might soar and wheel without brushing a wingtip against a side. Big chamber. Scores of openings to what seemed chambers or other tunnels pierced the walls at many places. They were reached and connected by the stairways hewn into the rock, corkscrewing up the cone level after level, crisscrossing at many points to form a complex, interlace design. Figures dwarfed by the immensity of the place moved upon them, toiling up and down, many carrying burdens that looked nearly too great to bear, but still struggling gamely on. The stairs climbed, dwindling with the distance to the very peak, disappearing into the glow of a great globe suspended there. This object acted as a sun for the underground world. It seemed to be incandescent, like iron heated, red hot in the forge Its blaze illuminated all the vast space, casting everything into a lurid, blood-red sunset hue. It was an appropriate light to fall upon the scene that occupied the center of the chamber's floor. This area was many acres of smooth and level stone. It was broken only by bizarre rock formations, thrusting up here and there, looking like grotesquely sculpted statues of beasts or birds or even human forms, distorted to make them not comical but obscene, widely scattered about the floor for the most part. At the center, a dozen of them formed an evenly spaced ring. A great fire burned within it, sending high, twisting tongues of its flames as if to lick hungrily at the radiant globe above it. Its light cast long, sinuously writhing shadows far out from the ring of the monstrous stones, making the floor seem to undulate and crawl as if alive. Around the fire, just within stones, several scores of long tables formed another ring. They were crowded by a large company engaged in a great revelry, their shouts and laughter echoing in the room, nearly drowning out the music at times. In the open space between them and the fire, other figures capered in a lively jig. The lanky man had come to halt once more at the sight of this eerie spectacle. The bears pressed in on both sides of him again, forcing him reluctantly forward as he stepped out. Something large and slug-like slid from his path, heaving its slime-covered softness into the deeper shadows of a serpentine pillar of stone. The man looked at it, shuddered, and went on. The cavern was alive with a myriad of other creatures. Many of them were not recognizable as anything natural. Things crawled, or fluttered, or oozed about the room. A ball of fluff, like a headless, limbless sheep, even rolled along. A larger number of caverns denizens seemed to be combinations of several animals, mismatched by some diseased mind as a kind of perverse joke. The worst of these had portions clearly recognizable as human. Bats with men's faces soared in the updrafts above the fire. A crab skittered along on the human limbs. A long-necked crane had a woman's busty torso absurdly propped on its skinny legs. With others, the mixture of a man and animal parts was less grotesque. A whole company of warriors standing guard at the tunnel's mouth upon the stairways and about the central ring of the stones were largely human in form, but sported heads of various creatures of an appropriately savage type. Wolf and weasel, fox and cat, bull and boar were all represented here. About the central fire in the ring of tables bustled another group who appeared to be largely servants. Cooks labored at spit and cauldron, while stewards rushed food and drink to the seated company of revelers. Here the heads were of a more domestic and herbivorous type: cow, goat, deer, and not surprisingly a great many sheep. Only at the tables were there beings that seemed to be of wholly human form. But even over them there was a strong aura of a bizarre, of the unnatural. The dress of most was rich, quite exotic. cloth of wonderful textures and bright colors, embroidered heavily with threads of silver and gold, but all too gaudy and all oddly mismatched, as if they had been gleaned haphazardly from widely varied sources and matched with not even the faintest sense of taste. Many of these beings were also laden with glinting jewelry, arms sometimes all but hidden by rings and bracelets. Each piece beautiful and tasteful by itself, but in such numbers creating a vulgar and ostentatious show. The faces about the ring formed a galley of human degeneracies, bloated and flushed by dissipation, twisted by strange passions, etched deep with cruelty, lit by the maniacal glee. Some animal faces were amongst them too. A horse-like beast stood at one table, a hawk of nearly man size perched at either side of it. All three dipped often and avidly into a great vat set before them. In fact, all the company at the tables were drinking heavily from an assortment of goblets, tankards, and mugs. Each was the product of a fine craftsmanship, worked in precious metals and set with jewels. Pardon me. Though some were cracked or badly dented from rough and careless use. Their present use had apparently been going on for some time, hoping to create the raucous festival mood. So that's where I stop. Page 20. Taking a break on that one. Okay. Pretty cool. But easy on the way, you know. Strange creatures in the wood, the heart of the mountain deep. Better know who you are. Grandmother, grandfather on the way. On the way, said. Got your way. Got your way. I shall return. Easy on the way. Easy on the way. Sitting in the mountain, sitting in the well, tree flame and well, tree flame and well, tree flame and well, said God the silver wrong, he's on the way. He's on the way. He's on the way. No, you didn't know. No, you didn't know. Still there. Even though you didn't know, you said you'd go. One more in the fire. One more to guard the flame. Tree flame and well, burning on, flame is burning on, our flame burns on, stay forevermore. God is on the way. Hey. Hold the flame, oh yeah. 100% all the way. Nothing at all if you don't stay. 100%. Nothing for me at all. Even though you can't see, maybe one day, one night you see. Oh, even though you didn't know, flame burns on in a chamber. In a chamber burn all day. Hold the flame, hold love's flame. You said, even though you didn't know. You didn't know, I know. I know. You know you didn't know. You waiting by the edge. You didn't know, you waiting by the edge, even though you didn't know, even though you didn't know, it would all burn, running all the way. You didn't know. You didn't see. Oh. Now you see clearly. Hold the flame. There you hold the flame. You hold the flame. Hold the flame. Hold the flame. There you hold the flame. Only the truth remains said. don't have love, you just be ashes in the ground. Say, run away. I remember from the other world, from the other world, said lights glowing in the distance. Sakura, say, say. Thank you.